I never thought much about dive bars until the night I walked into O'Malley's on the corner of 5th and Main. It was one of those places that smelled like old wood and spilled beer, where the neon signs flickered with a kind of tired persistence. I'd just moved to the city 2 weeks earlier, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and absolutely no idea what I was doing with my life. My apartment was a shoebox with radiator heat that barely worked, and I'd spent the entire day applying to jobs online until my eyes hurt from staring at the screen. I needed a drink. I needed to be around people, even if I didn't talk to them. The bar was mostly empty when I walked in around 8 on a Thursday night. A couple sat in a booth near the back, heads close together, lost in their own world. 2 guys in construction gear nursed beers at the far end of the bar, talking about a project that was running behind schedule, and then there was him. He sat alone, 3 stools from the end, his back straight despite the casual way his hands rested on either side of his glass. Even from behind, there was something about the way he carried himself that made me notice. Military, I thought immediately. Something about the posture, the precise way he'd placed his jacket on the stool beside him. I took a seat near the middle of the bar, leaving a respectful distance between us. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and silver streaks in her dark hair, smiled at me. "What can I get you, honey?" I ordered a beer, nothing fancy, and when she brought it over, I took that first cold sip and felt some of the tension leave my shoulders. The TV above the bar was playing a basketball game with the sound off, and I found myself watching it without really seeing it, just grateful to be somewhere that wasn't my empty apartment. I'd been there maybe 10 minutes when I felt eyes on me. I glanced over and caught him looking at me. He was older, maybe late 50s or early 60s, with silver hair cut military short and these incredibly blue eyes that seemed to look right through me. His face was weathered in a way that suggested he'd spent time outdoors, in harsh conditions, and there were lines around his eyes that could have been from squinting into the sun or from smiling or maybe both. He didn't look away when I caught him staring. Instead, he nodded just once and then turned back to his drink. My heart did this weird flutter thing that I didn't understand. I looked back at the TV, but I could feel the heat in my cheeks. Why was I blushing? It wasn't like anything had happened. Just a look, just a nod. But there was something about the weight of his gaze that had made my breath catch. 5 minutes later, the bartender set another beer in front of me. I looked up, confused. I didn't order this. She smiled and tilted her head toward the man down the bar. From the gentleman. "He says you remind him of someone." I turned to look at him again. He raised his glass slightly in my direction, and this time there was a small smile on his face. It transformed his whole expression, made him look younger, warmer. I raised my glass back, mouthing "thank you." He stood up then, picking up his drink, and for a second I thought he was leaving. Instead, he walked over and gestured to the stool next to mine. "Mind if I join you?" My mouth went dry. "No, not at all. Please." He settled onto the stool with an ease that seemed practiced, and up close I could see more details. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his hands were rough but clean, nails trimmed short, the wedding band on his left hand that caught the light. He extended his right hand to me. "Victor." I shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the firm but not aggressive grip. "I'm Reed." "Nice to meet you, Reed. Thanks for the company." I wasn't sure how long I could sit alone with my thoughts tonight. There was something in the way he said it that suggested depths I couldn't see yet. We talked, at first about nothing important. The weather, the city, how I was settling in. He told me he'd lived here for 30 years, that he'd retired from the army 5 years ago after 25 years of service. "What do you do now?" I asked. He smiled that same transforming smile. "I'm a high school history teacher. Teenagers keep me young, or at least they keep me on my toes." I laughed, and it felt good, natural. I bet they do. The conversation flowed easier than I expected. He asked about my degree, my job search, what had brought me to this particular city. I found myself telling him things I hadn't told anyone else, about feeling lost, about wondering if I'd made the right choice moving here alone, about the pressure I felt to have everything figured out at 23. He listened, really listened, in a way that made me feel seen. When I finished rambling, probably talking too much because of the beer and the nerves I didn't want to examine, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know, it's okay not to have all the answers yet. I'm 62, and I'm still figuring things out." Something about that simple statement made my chest tight. I looked at him, at the way the barlight caught the silver in his hair, at the gentle expression on his face, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't attraction, not exactly. Or maybe it was, but it was more than that. It was recognition. Like some part of me knew him, or wanted to know him, in a way that went beyond casual bar conversation. "You said I reminded you of someone," I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. He looked down at his drink, and for a second I thought I'd overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice quieter. "My son. You remind me of my son." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning I couldn't quite grasp. I didn't know what to say, so I stayed quiet, waiting. He took a sip of his drink before continuing. "David. He would have been about your age now. 24. He died 6 years ago. Afghanistan." Oh God. I'm so sorry. I felt like an idiot, like I'd stepped on a landmine I should have seen coming. But Victor shook his head. "No, don't be. I mean, thank you, but that's not why I'm telling you. It's just, you have the same way of talking with your hands when you get excited about something. The same kind of earnestness. David was like that. He cared so much about everything, felt everything so deeply. I worried about him, how the world would treat someone with a heart that open. I swallowed hard, not trusting my voice. We sat in silence for a moment, and it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like we were both holding space for something bigger than words. Finally, I managed to ask, what was he like? Victor's face lit up. He was brilliant, funny, kind. He wanted to be a teacher too, wanted to make a difference. He believed in people even when they didn't deserve it. He was braver than I ever was, and I don't just mean in combat. The way he said that last part made me look at him more closely. There was something underneath the words, something significant. Victor met my eyes, and I saw a question there, like he was deciding whether to trust me with something. He must have seen something in my expression that gave him permission, because he continued. David was gay. He came out to me when he was 17. I didn't handle it well at first. I'm ashamed to say I let him down when he needed me most. My heart was pounding now. I felt like I was standing on the edge of something, and I didn't know if I should step forward or back. I wanted to tell him it was okay, that parents make mistakes, but the words stuck in my throat. Victor kept talking. I was raised in a different time, with different ideas about what was acceptable. When he told me, I said things I regret. I pushed him away. It took me almost a year to come to my senses, to realize that my love for my son was more important than my prejudices. We reconciled, thank God. We had 5 good years before he deployed, but I'll never forgive myself for that year I wasted, for making him feel like he had to choose between being himself and having his father's love. I could feel tears prickling at the corners of my eyes. I blinked them back, but one escaped anyway, running down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. Victor saw. He reached out and put his hand on my shoulder, a gesture that was both fatherly and achingly tender. "I'm sorry, Reed. I didn't mean to unload all of this on you. You're practically a stranger." I shook my head. "No, I'm glad you told me." I paused, my heart hammering. "I'm gay too. I haven't really told many people. My parents don't know. I came here partly to figure out who I am without everyone watching." The words hung between us, and I waited for his reaction. Victor's hand squeezed my shoulder gently before falling away. "Thank you for trusting me with that. I know how hard it can be." I looked at him, at this man who was essentially a stranger but who somehow felt like something more. "Why did you buy me a drink? Really?" He smiled, and it was sad and warm at the same time. "Because you looked like you could use a friend. Because you reminded me of someone I loved more than life itself. Because I wanted to do for you what I wish someone had done for David when he was alone in a new city, trying to figure out who he was." I couldn't stop the tears then. They came in earnest, and I felt mortified, crying in a dive bar in front of this man I barely knew. But Victor didn't seem bothered. He signalled the bartender for napkins and handed me a few. "It's okay to cry," he said gently. "It's okay to feel things. That's what David taught me. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the most courageous thing we can do." We stayed at that bar for 3 more hours. We talked about everything and nothing. He told me stories about David, about his childhood, about the first boy he brought home, about his dreams and his fears. I told him about growing up in a small town where being different meant being invisible, about the crushes I'd never acted on, about the fear that I'd never find someone who understood me. Victor listened to all of it with the same careful attention, offering wisdom when I needed it, and silence when that was better. At some point, he asked me about my parents. I told him the truth, that I loved them, but I was terrified of disappointing them, that I'd been carrying this secret for so long it felt like part of my identity. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I tell you something David told me once?" I nodded. He said that the people who really love you will love you for who you are, not who they want you to be. And if they can't do that, then you have to love yourself enough to be okay without their approval. It was the hardest lesson I ever learned, and he was the one teaching me. I thought about that, about the weight of expectations and the freedom of authenticity. "Do you think he'd be proud of you?" I asked. "For teaching? For being open about who he was?" Victor smiled. "I hope so. I tried to be the kind of teacher he would have been. I sponsor the school's Gay-Straight Alliance. I make sure my classroom is a safe space for kids who feel different. It's my way of honouring him, of making sure his courage meant something." The bartender announced last call, and I was shocked to realise how late it had gotten. Victor and I settled our tabs and he walked me outside. The night air was cold and I shivered in my jacket. We stood on the sidewalk and I realised I didn't want the night to end. This stranger who'd bought me a drink had become something else in the span of a few hours, a confidant, a mentor, maybe even a friend. "Can I give you my number?" Victor asked. "I'd like to stay in touch if you're open to it. I could introduce you to some people, help you find your community here, and selfishly, I'd like to hear how you're doing. I'd like to know that you're okay." I pulled out my phone immediately. I'd really like that. We exchanged numbers, and then he did something unexpected. He pulled me into a hug, the kind of hug a father gives a son, warm and secure and full of unspoken affection. I hugged him back, and I felt something inside me settle, like a piece I didn't know was missing had clicked into place. Take care of yourself, Reed. And remember, you don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to keep moving forward, keep being honest about who you are. The rest will follow. I will, I promised. Thank you, Victor, for the drink, for the conversation, for everything. He smiled. Thank you for reminding me of him, for giving me a chance to be the person I should have been from the start. I watched him walk to his car, a steady figure disappearing into the darkness. Then I started the walk back to my apartment, and for the first time since I'd moved to this city, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. I felt understood. I felt like maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Over the next few months, Victor became a constant in my life. We met for coffee every couple of weeks. He introduced me to people, helped me navigate the social landscape of the city. Through him, I met other gay men, made friends, started to build a community. He never pushed, never pried, but he was always there when I needed advice or just someone to talk to. He became the father figure I didn't know I needed, the one who accepted me exactly as I was. One night, about 4 months after we first met, I finally worked up the courage to come out to my parents. I called Victor before I made the call home, my hands shaking. What if they reject me, I asked. What if they don't want anything to do with me? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That would be their loss, Reed, their tremendous loss. But you have to give them the chance to surprise you. And no matter what happens, you have people here who love you. You have me. I'm not going anywhere." His words gave me the courage I needed. I called my parents, and I told them the truth. It wasn't easy. There were tears, confusion, hard questions, but there wasn't rejection. My mum cried and said she loved me. My dad was quiet, processing, but he told me he needed time to understand but that I was still his son. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And when I called Victor afterward to tell him how it went, I could hear the pride in his voice. "I'm so proud of you, Reed." That took real courage. 6 months after that night at O'Malley's, Victor invited me to dinner at his house. It was the first time I'd been there, and I was nervous. When I arrived, I saw pictures of David everywhere. A bright-eyed young man with his father's smile and a warmth that radiated even from photographs. Victor introduced me to his wife, Margaret, a kind woman who hugged me like she'd known me for years. She told me that Victor talked about me often, that he considered me family. During dinner, Victor told me something that made my eyes water. He and Margaret had established a scholarship in David's name for LGBTQ students pursuing education degrees. They'd just awarded the first one, and they wanted me to be on the selection committee for next year. "I'd be honoured," I managed to say. "David would be proud of you both." Victor reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "He'd be proud of you too, Reed." "I know I am." That night, as I drove home, I thought about the strange path that had led me to that dive bar, to that chance encounter with a veteran who saw something in me that reminded him of his lost son. I thought about how grief and love can transform us, how sometimes the people we need find us when we least expect it. I thought about David, a young man I'd never met but who had shaped my life through his father's love and loss. I'd gone into O'Malley's that night looking for a drink, for a distraction from my loneliness and uncertainty. Instead, I'd found something infinitely more valuable. I'd found acceptance. I'd found family. I'd found proof that even in our darkest moments, when we're most lost, there are people out there who will see us, really see us, and offer us exactly what we need. Victor had bought me a drink because I reminded him of someone. But what he'd really given me was the courage to become myself, the permission to be vulnerable, and the knowledge that love, real love, doesn't come with conditions. It accepts, it supports, it endures. I still meet Victor at O'Malley's sometimes, sitting on those same stools where we first connected. We talk about life, about the students he's teaching, about the job I finally landed, about the guy I've started seeing. And every time, when we part ways, he gives me that same fatherly hug, and I feel grateful for the random Thursday night that changed everything. Some people come into our lives for a reason. Victor came into mine to show me that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up for you. It's about who sees you struggling and decides to buy you a drink and stay for the conversation. It's about who loves you not despite who you are, but because of it. I never got to meet David, but I carry him with me, in the courage to be myself, in the kindness I try to show to others who are struggling, in the belief that vulnerability is strength and that love, in all its forms, is worth fighting for. Victor gave me all of that, and he did it because a stranger in a bar reminded him of his son. Sometimes I wonder what David would think of me, of this unexpected connection between his father and some lost kid who wandered into a dive bar. I like to think he'd be happy. I like to think he'd see what I see, that his courage and his father's love created ripples that extended far beyond their relationship, touching lives they'd never know. I'm one of those lives, and I'm better for it.